Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be here, so thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to local authorities. I'm going to be talking in more detail about a couple of the policies that Rachel mentioned earlier, and giving the local, hopefully a local authority perspective on things. But first, before I start, I'll just give you a few words about the Renewable Energy Association. We are the trade association that actually lobbied for the two financial incentives I'm going to talk about in a moment, the renewable heat incentive and the feed-in tariffs. We led a campaign with Friends of the Earth to bring these into place, and our key driver was to actually get policies which were more easily understandable for those people that would be using renewables themselves on site, and was simple to understand, because the renewables obligation can be very complicated. We're the largest trade association in terms of numbers of member companies, with 650 corporate members and rising, and they span all ranges of renewable energy applications, from heat, combined heat and power, electricity generation, transport fuels, and the latest addition is cleaning up biogas, taking the carbon dioxide out, putting it into the grid. Biomethane injection, we call that. And our members are active in all forms of renewable energy technology. So I'm going to talk about, briefly, because Rachel's done such a good job of saying why we need to do renewable energy, the context, and then the two incentives I mentioned, and then give an example of how they're expected to work, a worked example, and then elaborate a little more about the outcomes for the spending review. So really, the Renewable Energy Directive was the main driving force why we need to do this. I'm sure you're all well aware of it. We need to get 15% of our energy from renewables in the UK by 2020. And our contribution is towards Europe as a whole reaching 20% by 2020. And as I think, yes, I'm showing this same pie chart that Rachel showed, probably even more small and hard to read. But within that, they're not targets apart from the transport one, which is actually a target within the overall 15%. We need to achieve about 12% from heat, 30% from electricity, and the 10% from transport. And that is a very tall order. If you look at where we are at the moment, we have nearly 7% electricity, so we need a fourfold expansion there. We have just over 1% of renewable heat, so 12-fold it needs to grow, and transport, an increase of 7 times. So there is an awful lot to do, and you play a very important role in it. So really, looking at the renewable energy technologies that are most likely to be relevant to the public sector, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but in general, mostly on the on-site and district and community heat kind of level, it'll be solar, thermal, biomass, biofuel boilers, ground and air source heat pumps. Those are the main ones, and the renewable heat incentive is what you need to know about there. On-site electricity, PV and micro wind. I say micro, in fact it's up to 5 megawatts, and as Rachel was saying, often the most effective, cost-effective wind turbines are actually significant in size. And that we will be looking at the feed-in tariffs. And then all of the other renewable energy technologies for power generation developed at 5 megawatts and above really fall within the remit of the renewables obligation, which is a tool for the specialist project developer, those who are, for whom energy is their core business and project development. So looking at these two policies, the feed-in tariffs to start with. So basically, there are 3 components of value that a person or a local authority that installs on-site power generation will get through the feed-in tariffs. For every kilowatt hour of electricity that's generated, there'll be a payment. How many pence per kilowatt hour depends, and I've got a table coming up in a minute. But that is for each kilowatt hour of electricity that's generated. Now also, if any of that is actually not used on site but exported to the grid, there is also an additional 3 pence export tariff. And that encourages energy efficiency after the installation is made. But it does mean that if you're actually installing to meet your own needs, the value to you of of the installation is greater than if you are purely exporting, because you avoid having to purchase in electricity, and the cost of importing the electricity is greater than the price that you will get paid for exporting it. So I'll do a worked example. I'll just use a solar panel on a house to do that, because it's a very straightforward way of explaining it. So this one I'm going to talk about is going to be installed in a house that's got an annual electricity demand of 4.5 megawatt hours, a 2 kilowatt PV panel producing 1.7 megawatt hours a year will be put on it. It gets paid 41 pence, just over 41 pence per kilowatt hour. It earns 3 pence from the export tariff, and it will avoid purchasing in electricity at 12 pence a kilowatt hour. So very roughly, it will produce 1.7 megawatt hours, earning 41.3 pence, which gets it £700. It can expect to use about half of that electricity itself and half exported. Obviously, this will depend on whether people are occupying the house during the day when the sun's shining or not, but that's an average figure. And that export tariff would earn £25, and the avoided imports, when the person is in and using the electricity, would save about £100 a year. So all in all, the total benefit comes out to just over £800, which could give a payback period of about 10 years in terms of the capital outlay. But there are other models, as Abigail talked about, where the private sector and indeed the public sector can step in and actually offer, in exchange for free electricity, to install the panels at their own cost, and the tenants can benefit from that.
Do you want to just hold on a second? There's a huge number. Do you want to just quickly disperse yourself into the seats over here? There's one down here, and there's one down here. I just want you to have your fair crack of the whip. There's a huge number. That's your guide, and I'll give you a little bit extra. That's ticking down. You've got 12 minutes left.
Right. Okay. Oh, it is. So
Yeah.
it is. Okay.
Okay.
So,
thanks.
carrying on now. Now I've worked out what the timer's doing, on flashing in front of me here. So I mentioned, I talked through a PV example, but these tariff rates do apply to other technologies as well. I don't know whether you can see that at all, but these numbers this table is very widely available. It covers anaerobic digestion, hydro, PV and wind. It doesn't cover biomass. It may be expanded to that in the future if the Renewable Energy Association has its way, because we did believe it should be included from the beginning. And those payments are available from either periods varying from 20 to 25 years, and they vary. They're banded by size, generally giving... The overall objective is to give about the same rates of return, because smaller installations do actually require a higher tariff to actually make them viable. So we were delighted, absolutely delighted, that the feed-in tariffs emerged unscathed from the comprehensive spending review. There had been an awful lot of speculation about some sort of revision, particularly of the solar tariff, in the run-up to the 20th of October. But at the moment, they stay the same. The review is taking place as it was scheduled. It will be intended to save 40 million when it does take place. But there is a question mark hanging out there. If the deployment rates are manifested to be faster than expected, and we don't really know what expected means at the moment, then that review might be brought forward. So this is something that we, the Renewable Energy Association, will be talking to DEC about and getting an understanding of that. And I understand that fairly soon, before the end of the year, there will be some clarity on the expected deployment rates and what might trigger the bringing forward of this review. So it's on the whole very good news, but there is more clarity to come soon. So other comments about the feed-in tariffs, they are linked to the retail price index, so they'll go up with inflation. Tariffs will be reduced over time, and this is called digression. So for new entrants to the scheme, the tariff will go down in a scheduled way, reducing by a certain percentage each year, unless, of course, the review changes that. But at the moment, we know what those digression rates are.